The colony of New Dawn was supposed to be a beacon of hope, a testament to humanity's relentless drive to push forward, to carve its place among the stars. Nestled on the lush world of Epsilon Prime, the settlement thrived under twin suns, its glass-like towers reflecting golden light as sprawling green valleys stretched beyond the horizon. It was a world untouched by war, unscarred by conquest, a place where humanity sought to build, not destroy. But hope is fragile in a galaxy ruled by tyrants. The attack came without warning. One moment, the people of New Dawn were going about their lives, merchants trading goods in the central plaza, children playing in the artificial parks, engineers working to expand the colony's infrastructure. Then, the sky darkened. The light of the twin suns was eclipsed by something massive, something unnatural, a shadow of war. The Va'ari Dominion had arrived. High above, their warships hovered like silent executioners, their sleek hulls glistening with predatory intent. No communication, no declaration, just the cold, calculating decision to unleash destruction upon the unsuspecting colony below. And then, the sky ignited. Columns of energy lanced downward, striking buildings with merciless precision. Towers crumbled in an instant, reduced to molten slag. The central plaza was torn apart, sending civilians screaming in every direction. Some ran toward emergency shelters. Others, too slow or too paralyzed with fear, were incinerated where they stood. The air itself seemed to burn, filled with the acrid stench of scorched earth and vaporized flesh. Within minutes, the once thriving colony was nothing more than smoldering ruins. Bodies lay scattered amid the debris, some barely recognizable. Emergency broadcasts flickered desperately before falling silent. And then, just as suddenly as they had come, the Va'ari fleet vanished. It was not a battle. There had been no war to justify this atrocity. The Dominion had not acted out of defense or necessity. No demands had been made, no terms offered. This was not a strike against a military target. It was an execution, a warning to any who dared think themselves free from the grip of the Dominion's iron rule. But the Va'ari had made a mistake. Because in their ruthless efficiency, in their belief that no single life mattered, they had overlooked something. Child. Her name would be remembered, etched into the hearts of billions. A girl, no older than 10, who had once dreamed of reaching the stars, who had laughed and played in the streets of New Dawn, unaware that her life would become the spark that set an empire ablaze. Back on Earth, when the casualty reports came in, there was grief. A deep, shattering grief that rippled across the homeworld and every colony alike. But grief was only the beginning. Then came the rage. Humanity had long been underestimated. They were the newcomers to the galactic stage, seen as insignificant, a race of ambitious explorers with no real power. The Dominion had believed they would mourn, protest, and then move on. But humans do not forget, and humans do not forgive. Every great journey starts with a few brave explorers. Right now, HFY Chronicles-849 is just beginning, and your support means everything. If you enjoy unraveling the mysteries of the universe, hit subscribe. It's free, and it helps us grow this community together. The response from Earth was not a diplomatic message. There were no desperate pleas for justice, no negotiations for peace. Humanity had watched other species beg for mercy, and they had seen what mercy from the Dominion truly meant: slavery, extermination, or worse. So, instead they sent their own message. Across the Sol system, factories roared to life. Assembly lines that had once produced freighters were converted overnight, now churning out war machines at an unprecedented rate. Shipyards around Mars and Titan saw their schedules obliterated as military officials took full command, ordering the mass production of vessels that would dwarf any fleet humanity had ever assembled. Recruitment stations overflowed. Military academies saw a flood of new volunteers, men and women who were not just willing to fight, but demanding it. The loss of New Dawn had not just awakened humanity's anger, it had united them. Billions of people, from every colony and outpost, had the same thought burning in their minds. This cannot go unanswered. Still, the galactic community watched with amusement. A few warships, a couple of battalions. It would not matter. The Dominion, had crushed entire civilizations before. What difference could one angry species make? But they had misunderstood something critical, because humanity was not preparing a fleet of thousands. They were building 500,000 dreadnoughts, and this war was only just beginning. The galaxy did not take humanity seriously. Even as Earth's orbital shipyards thundered with activity, even as Mars's production lines churned out warships at an unprecedented rate, the galactic community remained unconcerned. After all, humanity was young. Their reach extended only to a handful of colonies, their military strength untested in true interstellar warfare. They were a species of explorers, traders, and dreamers, ambitious certainly, but insignificant in the grand scheme of the cosmos. And the Va'ari Dominion? They were not just another empire. They were an ancient force, a superpower that had ruled through fear for thousands of years. They had crushed rebellions before. They had shattered fleets, burned worlds, erased entire civilizations from existence, when necessary. To them, humanity was nothing more than a minor nuisance. That belief would soon cost them dearly. Deep beneath Earth's surface, hidden within fortified command centers, the War Council convened. Military leaders, scientists, and strategists pored over holotables displaying real-time data on ship production, logistics, and battle readiness. The war was not yet officially declared, but in the hearts of every man and woman in that room, it had already begun. Time frame? One general asked, his voice grim. 17 months before the fleet reaches full combat strength, an admiral responded. But we can be ready for limited operations within 6. The room fell silent. For a moment, even with their rapid mobilization, war was a slow beast to awaken. The Dominion had entire armadas ready to deploy at a moment's notice. Earth would need time to catch up, and time was something they did not have. Intelligence reports indicate that the Dominion sees no threat from us, another officer spoke up. They haven't increased patrols near our borders. They haven't fortified their holdings. As far as they're concerned, the matter of New Dawn is closed. A bitter chuckle spread through the room. The arrogance of the Dominion was almost laughable. They had killed a child, wiped out an entire colony, and simply moved on, as if humanity would bow, as if the fire of vengeance would not consume them. But the fire had already been lit, across every colony, every outpost, every station. Under Earth's banner, the call to arms had gone out. It was not mandatory. There were no forced conscriptions, no press-ganged civilians. And yet, the enlistment numbers surged beyond anything the military had anticipated. Soldiers, pilots, engineers, men and women who had once lived peaceful lives now stood in line, waiting for their turn to take up arms. For every citizen lost on New Dawn, 1,000 more volunteered to fight. Ship production accelerated at an impossible pace. Earth's shipyards had always been efficient, but now, driven by the fury of an entire species, they became something more. Massive, kilometer-long dreadnoughts rolled off the assembly lines in staggering numbers, each one an embodiment of humanity's unyielding resolve. Unlike the sleek, elegant ships of other species, humanity's warships were built for devastation. Monolithic hulls, layered with thick armor plating, weapons bristling from every surface, plasma lances, kinetic cannons, missile arrays capable of raining destruction from light years away. Energy shielding reinforced by redundant power cores, ensuring that no single breach could bring them down. And at the heart of it all, the most advanced AI combat systems ever developed, each one capable of coordinating entire battle groups with machine precision. They were not just ships. They were vengeance given form. And they were being built in numbers the galaxy had never seen before. Even as the dreadnoughts assembled, so too did Earth's elite forces. The Dominion had their feared warriors, their augmented shock troops who had terrorized the weak for centuries. But humanity had been perfecting the art of war since long before they reached the stars. Special forces underwent brutal training regimens, pushing their bodies and minds to the absolute limit. Cybernetic enhancements, exosuits, and neural combat links turned ordinary soldiers into walking war machines. And above all, they trained as a single, unified force. There were no individual factions, no divided allegiances. Humanity stood together as one, driven by a singular purpose. The Dominion had believed that their display of power would break humanity. Instead, It had united them. But war was not fought with ships alone. War required intelligence, strategy, and knowledge of the enemy, and so, even as the military prepared for battle, the Shadow War had already begun. Covert teams, Black Ops units trained for missions that could never be officially acknowledged, slipped past enemy lines. They infiltrated Dominion-controlled space, gathering critical data, fleet movements, supply lines, weaknesses that could be exploited. Every piece of information, no matter how small, was another weapon in humanity's arsenal. And then, the final piece fell into place. The Dominion had a seat of power, a world at the heart of their empire, Varos Prime, a fortress world, shielded by massive defense arrays, surrounded by armadas, protected by layers of security that no fleet had ever breached. It was the heart of the beast, and it would be the place where humanity would strike the first blow. The War Council stood in silence as the plan took shape. This was not about survival. This was not about diplomacy. This was not about sending a message. This was about retribution. And so, after 17 months of ceaseless preparation, the order was given. 500,000 dreadnoughts, the largest armada ever assembled in human history, and its destination was Varos Prime. 5. Galaxy had laughed at humanity before, but they would not laugh again. Because war was coming, and humanity was bringing hell with them. For 17 months, the galaxy ignored humanity. The Dominion continued its conquests, sweeping across the outer systems, crushing dissidents, and expanding its reach. They assumed humanity had learned its lesson, that Earth had accepted its place, cowed into submission. Their war fleets remained stationed along their usual borders, their eyes fixed on their traditional rivals. Humanity was beneath their notice. They did not see what was coming. In the dark void between stars, humanity had become a storm. 500,000 dreadnoughts, the number alone was staggering. No species had ever fielded such an armada. The Dominion's own battle fleets numbered in the tens of thousands, enough to subjugate the weaker races, enough to maintain their grip on the galaxy. But against the war machine that humanity had built in secret, those numbers were laughable. And the dreadnoughts were only the beginning. For every capital ship, there were 10 cruisers, 100 destroyers, 1,000 support vessels. The fleet was an ecosystem of destruction, perfectly balanced between offense, defense, and logistics. Orbital refineries processed asteroid fields into raw materials, while mobile shipyards ensured that damaged vessels could be repaired mid-campaign. Humanity did not just prepare for a war, they prepared to win it. But sheer numbers were not enough. The Dominion had ruled through technological superiority for generations. They wielded advanced energy weapons, gravitational disruptors, and shields that could withstand entire barrages. If humanity hoped to challenge them, brute force would not be enough. So humanity evolved. Scientists and engineers, driven by the rage of a species wronged, unlocked technologies that would have taken centuries under normal circumstances. Energy weapons capable of breaking apart matter at a molecular level. Projectile cannons that fired solid slugs at near-relativistic speeds, each impact releasing more kinetic force than a planetary bombardment. Cyber warfare systems that could infiltrate and cripple enemy networks before a single shot was fired. And then, there were the war forms. The Dominion was infamous for its shock troops, massive gene-engineered warriors clad in powered armor, armed with plasma blades and particle cannons, capable of tearing through enemy ranks like gods of war. Humanity did not match them. Humanity surpassed them. In the deepest laboratories of Mars and Europa, humanity had created something new. The first war forms were terrifying to behold. 2 meters tall, their bodies a seamless blend of organic tissue and synthetic plating. Their neural systems were enhanced, reaction speeds beyond anything natural. Strength that could tear apart enemy armor with their hands alone. And yet, these were not mindless machines or berserk warriors. They were soldiers, disciplined, unbreakable. They were not unleashed on the battlefield yet. Their time would come. But first, the Dominion would learn the price of their arrogance. The march to war. The Dominion did not realize the storm had gathered until it was too late. In the farthest reaches of human-controlled space, the first fleets moved, not in anger, not in desperation, but with cold, calculated precision. Stealth ships infiltrated Dominion territory, mapping out supply lines and tracking military deployments. Black Ops teams executed silent assassinations of key commanders, disrupting chain-of-command structures before the first shot was fired. By the time the Dominion received their first warning, over 100,000 warships were already in motion. The first battle was over in minutes. A Dominion patrol fleet, stationed near an unremarkable system, intercepted what they believed to be a rogue human battle group, perhaps the remnants of Earth's military, making one last, desperate stand. The Dominion commander barely had time to react before his fleet was erased from existence. The Dreadnoughts struck with overwhelming force. Hypersonic projectiles shredded Dominion hulls before their shields could even register an impact. EMP bursts blinded enemy sensors. AI-driven squadrons of fighter drones swarmed capital ships, breaching their interiors and neutralizing crews in moments. No survivors. No distress call. The next battle lasted longer, 2 hours. A Dominion outpost on the fringes of their empire detected an incoming human fleet. They laughed, at first. Humanity had made their first mistake, they believed, marching into enemy territory without understanding the consequences. Then, the bombardment began. Dreadnoughts moved in formation, firing in perfect synchronicity. The Dominion's planetary defenses, which had withstood sieges for centuries, shattered under the first volley. Shield generators melted from sustained kinetic impacts. Cities vanished under relentless orbital fire. Entire legions of Dominion warriors were annihilated before they had the chance to set foot on the battlefield. The humans did not speak. No messages. No ultimatums. No demands. Only destruction. The fall of the Dominion's Outer Worlds panic spread through the Dominion's ruling caste. This was not how war was fought. Conflict was supposed to be political, a game of strategy and measured responses. Opponents were supposed to surrender, to negotiate, to fear the consequences of defiance. Humanity did not negotiate. They did not slow their advance. World after world fell to the human armada. The Dominion's forces, used to fighting disorganized rebellions, were utterly unprepared for the sheer brutality of a united human war machine. Entire fleets were vaporized in engagements so one-sided they could hardly be called battles. Planetary strongholds, once considered impenetrable, were reduced to ash within hours. Dominion commanders tried to regroup. They attempted ambushes, setting traps along known hyperlanes, deploying overwhelming forces to intercept human fleets. It did not matter. Humanity adapted. Their ships were faster, their strategies unpredictable. And worst of all, they never retreated. Every Dominion fleet that engaged the humans met the same fate. No survivors. No mercy. For the first time in the Dominion's long history, they were afraid. And at the center of this storm, leading the charge, was Earth's High Command. Their orders remained unchanged from the moment the war began. Leave, no doubt. Make them understand. The Dominion had taken one innocent life. Humanity was taking their empire, and the final blow had yet to fall. Va'aros Prime awaits. Deep in the heart of the Dominion, the capital world of Va'aros Prime stood as the last bastion of their rule. Massive orbital defenses, battle stations, and entire armadas surrounded it. It was said that no force in the galaxy could breach its walls, but the galaxy had never seen what 500,000 human dreadnoughts could do. The march was nearly complete, and the storm was about to break. For the first time in Dominion history, their empire trembled. They had ruled for centuries, their power unquestioned, their fleets unmatched. They had crushed rebellions with ease, shattered civilizations that dared resist, and imposed their will upon the stars. Yet now, in the wake of their hubris, they faced an enemy unlike any before. Humanity did not come as supplicants. They did not beg for mercy. They did not acknowledge the Dominion's authority. They came as executioners. The war had ceased to be a war. It was an extermination. The Dominion's fracturing hold panic spread across the Dominion's empire like wildfire. In the outer territories, planetary governors abandoned their posts, fleeing to safer systems. Military command networks collapsed under the weight of endless defeats. Dominion fleets, once feared across the stars, found themselves unable to hold their ground. It wasn't just the scale of the human offensive that shattered them, it was how humanity fought. The Dominion was accustomed to wars of attrition. They fought conflicts that lasted decades, wearing down their enemies through sheer endurance. They were not prepared for the lightning speed of the human onslaught. When humanity struck, it was with overwhelming force. Entire fleets would materialize, out of the void, moving with precision that no Dominion admiral could match. The battles were not battles, they were executions. The Dominion's forces barely had time to react before their ships were annihilated, their communications jammed, their command centers obliterated in pinpoint strikes. And then, before their distress signals could even reach reinforcements, the human fleets were gone. No occupation, no negotiation, only silence, punctuated by the cold, efficient eradication of Dominion military infrastructure. World after world, system after system, the Dominion lost ground at a rate that defied logic. Their leaders, so used to absolute power, could only watch in horror as their empire collapsed around them. And the worst part? Humanity had not even reached the core worlds yet. The death of the Dominion's fleets. Realizing the full scope of the crisis, the Dominion's high command assembled what they believed would be their salvation, the Grand Armada. Every remaining warship in the Dominion's possession, 200,000 battlecruisers, dreadnoughts, and carriers, was pulled back from every sector. Entire fleets abandoned their defensive posts. Every available soldier was conscripted. Even their ancient war reserves, ships that had been mothballed for centuries, were reactivated. This would be their stand, their last chance to halt the human advance before it reached the core systems. They gathered their forces in the Va'aros expanse, a region of space filled with nebulas and shifting gravitational anomalies, believing the unpredictable terrain would slow the human fleets. They laid ambushes, prepared overlapping fields of fire, and formed defensive lines that had stood against the Dominion's greatest enemies in centuries past. They were ready. Then, humanity arrived. The Battle of the Va'aros expanse. The Dominion. Commanders expected a traditional battle, fleets meeting in open combat, exchanging fire in grand formations. They expected humanity to hesitate. They expected fear. Instead, the moment the first human warships exited warp, hell itself descended upon them. Humanity did not waste time with probing attacks or cautious maneuvers. Their dreadnoughts ripped into the Dominion's defenses like wolves tearing apart prey. Hypersonic projectiles shattered Dominion battlecruisers before their shields could even register impact. Plasma lances carved through formations with surgical precision, vaporizing ships in an instant. Drone swarms, numbering in the millions, bypassed shields entirely, infiltrating enemy vessels and tearing through their crews like a plague of metal locusts. Dominion admirals barked orders, trying to regroup, but the humans never gave them the chance. Their warships moved with terrifying coordination, cutting through the Dominion's carefully laid defenses as if they were nothing. And then, humanity revealed the true horror of their war machine. In the heart of the battle, the Dominion's command ships, massive dreadnoughts that housed their fleet admirals, suddenly went silent. Not destroyed, not disabled, silent. Their crews seized in place, screaming in terror. Human cyber warfare teams, using technology beyond anything the Dominion had ever encountered, had hacked their neural links mid-battle. The highest-ranking officers of the Dominion's fleets found their own minds turned against them, their memories rifled through like open books, their command systems overridden. Ships turned on one another. Dominion capital vessels suddenly began firing on their own fleets, their crews helpless as their own weapons were turned against them. A single hour into the battle, and the Dominion's Grand Armada ceased to exist. 200,000 warships, the pride of their empire, gone. The humans did not lose a single dreadnought. The broadcast. When the battle was over, humanity did something the Dominion had not expected. They did not press their attack. They did not bombard planets. They sent a message. Across every Dominion-controlled world, their communication networks, still crippled from human cyber warfare, suddenly flickered back to life. A single transmission played. There was no grand speech, no demands. A single human stood before the camera, their face expressionless. Behind them, the wreckage of the Dominion's Grand Armada drifted in space, burning. And, They spoke 3 words. You deserve worse. Then, silence. And every Dominion world, from the lowliest colony to the capital itself, knew what was coming next. Varos Prime. The end approaches. Deep in the heart of the Dominion, the capital world of Varos Prime stood defiant. Even after the annihilation of their fleet, even as world after world fell to the human onslaught, the Dominion's rulers still clung to their arrogance. Their capital was a fortress, ringed by planetary shields, orbital defenses, and the last remnants of their ground forces. It had never fallen, it had never been breached. They still believed in the deepest corners of their hearts that humanity would hesitate, that their thirst for vengeance would be tempered by mercy, that the humans would stop. And then the sky turned black. Hundreds of thousands of human warships arrived in system, blocking out the light of their own sun. They had come to end this. The last remnants of the Dominion watched in horror as human dreadnoughts descended upon their homeworld, their weapons primed, their soldiers waiting. And at last, the truth became undeniable. This was not a war. This was not retribution. This was judgment, and humanity had come to deliver it. Varos Prime stood alone. The once proud heart of the Dominion, a world that had ruled over countless civilizations with an iron grip, now faced the unthinkable. Every outer colony was gone, every fleet obliterated, every line of defense shattered. The Dominion's leaders had always believed in their supremacy. Their doctrines dictated that all other species were lesser, incapable of true greatness, destined only to serve. They had viewed the humans as nothing more than an irritation, a minor species to be crushed and forgotten. But humanity was not just another species, they were retribution incarnate. And now, the entire might of the human war machine hovered over their last stronghold. The sky turns black. The first warning came as a shadow. Varos Prime, a jewel of the Dominion's empire, had always been bathed in the golden glow of its twin suns. But as the human armada arrived, the skies darkened. Thousands upon thousands of human warships, so many that they blotted out the light, descended from orbit, eclipsing the capital world beneath their terrible presence. The Dominion's planetary defense systems engaged immediately, launching wave after wave of anti-ship missiles, energy lances, and planetary railgun salvos. The entire sky ignited as their weapons sought to tear apart the human fleet. It was futile. Humanity had already dismantled the Dominion's military-industrial complex across the galaxy. Without their supply chains, without their strategic infrastructure, Varos Prime was fighting alone. And it showed. Human countermeasures activated before a single projectile could even land. Swarm drones intercepted missiles mid-air, neutralizing them in microseconds. High-intensity particle fields redirected energy blasts, sending them harmlessly into the void. Dominion railgun shells struck human dreadnoughts at full force, only to crumple against adaptive kinetic barriers, disintegrating before they could penetrate the hulls. The Dominion's final defense line had failed before the battle even began. Then, humanity retaliated. Planetary shields. A lie. Unraveled. For centuries, the Dominion's rulers had boasted that Varos Prime was impenetrable. Their planetary shields were the strongest ever built, capable of withstanding sustained bombardment. For years without failing, they had designed them to endure even the harshest sieges, believing that no force in the galaxy could overcome them. They had underestimated human ingenuity. The moment the planetary defense grid activated, human cyber warfare teams went to work. For the Dominion, cyber warfare was an afterthought. They had always relied on overwhelming physical force, believing that true war was fought with firepower, not digital precision. Humanity, on the other hand, had honed their digital warfare capabilities for centuries, and now, against a technologically stagnant empire, they wielded them like a scalpel. Within minutes, every automated system on Varos Prime went dark. Weapons went offline. Defense grids flickered, then shut down. The shields, their greatest source of protection, collapsed without a single human shot fired. The Dominion's leaders watched in horror as the vast shield network, meant to protect them from annihilation, became their tombstone. The planet was now exposed, and the humans hadn't even begun. Orbital bombardment. Precision, not annihilation. The Dominion expected an immediate bombardment. They had spent centuries enforcing their rule through orbital strikes, teaching the galaxy that defiance meant death from above. They assumed humanity would do the same. But humanity was different. Instead of indiscriminately razing the planet, humanity targeted with precision. Dreadnoughts unleashed pinpoint kinetic strikes against key Dominion infrastructure. Military compounds, command centers, and war factories were obliterated in surgical strikes. Every known governmental stronghold, every fortress, every base ceased to exist within moments. But civilian areas remained untouched. This was not the Dominion's way of war. This was justice. The fall of the High Council deep within Va'aros Prime's central government tower, the Dominion's High Council gathered in desperation. They were the architects of oppression, the ones who had orchestrated the enslavement and extermination of countless species across the centuries. For generations they had ruled without fear. Now they were trapped in their own palace. Their escape shuttles had been seized by human strike teams. Their security forces had already surrendered. They tried to send messages across the galaxy, calling for reinforcements, only to realize that there was no one left to answer. The Dominion had ruled the stars for centuries, and now they stood alone. The march of human soldiers. Then, the ground invasion began. Human troop carriers descended through the atmosphere, deploying legions of soldiers in exosuits that outmatched anything the Dominion had ever seen. The remaining Dominion forces attempted to resist, but they were outmaneuvered, outgunned, and outmatched at every level. Dominion soldiers were trained for overwhelming force, not strategic adaptability. Humans fought with tactical precision, exploiting weaknesses in ways the Dominion's military had never encountered. It wasn't long before the last Dominion soldiers laid down their weapons, and with them, the Dominion ceased to exist. The moment that changed everything. Human forces stormed the government tower, breaching the High Council's chamber. The Dominion's rulers, once the most feared beings in the galaxy, cowered before them. For the first time in history, they felt the fear they had inflicted on others, and in that moment, they realized the war was never about conquest. It was never about resources. It was never about domination. It was about justice. Humanity had come not to rule, but to end the tyranny. And now, the final judgment was at hand. A galaxy holds. Its breath, news of the Dominion's downfall spread like wildfire. Across the galaxy, species that had long suffered under their rule watched in stunned silence as the impossible became reality. The Dominion was no more. For centuries, they had been the undisputed rulers of the known galaxy. Their fleets had crushed any who resisted. Their armies had burned entire worlds to the ground. No species had ever stood against them and survived, until now. Humanity had not only survived, but prevailed. But now, the question remained. What would they do next? Would they take the Dominion's place? Would they demand tribute, territory, or eternal submission? Would they impose their own rule over the shattered remains of the Dominion's empire, or had they come for something greater? As the last embers of war faded, the galaxy held its breath, waiting for humanity's final decision. The surrender of the High Council, within the ruins of the Dominion's government tower, humanity's forces stood over the High Council. The once mighty rulers of the galaxy, those who had commanded trillions with a single word, were now prisoners of war. Some of them begged for mercy. Others still clung to the delusion that they could negotiate, offering lies, promises, and hollow bargains in exchange for their lives. A few even attempted defiance, proclaiming that the Dominion spirit would never die. None of it mattered. The truth was undeniable. Their armies were gone. Their fleets were nothing more than debris in the void. Their empire, built on slavery, terror, and blood, had collapsed in the span of a single campaign. And humanity had done it without becoming the monsters they had fought. No genocides, no senseless destruction, no conquest, only justice. The High Council was taken into custody, escorted away under the watchful eyes of human soldiers. They would face trial, not just before humanity, but before every species the Dominion had ever wronged, and in that moment the galaxy realized something far more terrifying than humanity's strength. They weren't conquerors. They weren't tyrants. They weren't seeking revenge. They were something the galaxy had never seen before. They were protectors. The liberation of the subjugated species across former Dominion space. The chains of oppression shattered. Entire species, once enslaved, their homeworlds stripped of resources, their cultures nearly erased, saw human warships not as conquerors, but as liberators. Humanity did not take their worlds for themselves. They did not demand servitude. They did not impose a new rule. Instead, they helped them stand again. Human engineers restored destroyed infrastructure. Human medical teams treated the wounded, saving lives regardless of species. Human diplomats met with newly freed leaders, offering unity instead of dominance. For the first time in history, an empire had fallen, and its conquerors sought not to rule, but to heal. And as the liberated peoples gazed upon humanity's fleet, they did not see new overlords. They saw hope. The remnants of the Dominion. Not all in the Dominion accepted their fate. Scattered warlords and surviving officers, unable to accept defeat, retreated to the outer fringes of the galaxy. They still believed they could rebuild. That, given time, they could rise again. But humanity was already waiting. Before the war had even ended, human intelligence agencies had tracked every potential escape route. They had mapped out hidden supply caches, secret military bases, and contingency plans the Dominion had put in place long ago. One by one, they were dismantled. Humanity did not let the Dominion's remnants fester like an infection. There would be no resurgence. No resurgence. No return. The Dominion's story was over. Humanity's final decision. And then, at the height of their power, with every right to rule, with the entire galaxy expecting them to take control, humanity stepped back. They did not declare themselves rulers of the galaxy. They did not claim the Dominion's former throne. Instead, they issued a simple proclamation. The age of tyrants is over. Humanity had not fought this war to replace the Dominion. They had fought it to ensure it would never happen again. They would not rule. They would not dictate. Instead, they would watch. And should any power ever attempt to repeat what the Dominion had done, humanity would return. Not as conquerors, not as oppressors, but as the sword and shield of a galaxy that had suffered for too long. A new era begins. The galaxy had never known true freedom. It had only ever known rulers and the ruled. But now, with the Dominion gone and humanity refusing to seize power for themselves, a new era began. New alliances were forged. New governments arose, and in every corner of the stars, whispers of humanity's final promise echoed. The galaxy is free, but if darkness rises again, we will be waiting. The galaxy watches, the galaxy learns. Long after the war had ended, the memory of humanity's vengeance, and its mercy, remained burned into the hearts and minds of every species. Across the former Dominion's empire, from the sprawling metropolises of once enslaved worlds to the quiet outposts at the edges of the void, one undeniable truth had taken root. The galaxy had changed forever. No longer was fear the dominant force that governed civilizations. No longer was tyranny seen as inevitable. Where once the Dominion's shadow stretched across the stars, now there was light. Uncertain and new, but unmistakably real. For the first time, species that had only ever known submission found themselves free. Some struggled with that freedom. After generations of oppression, after lives spent under the weight of the Dominion's boot, what did freedom even mean? Could a people who had never ruled themselves suddenly govern their own fate? But humanity did not abandon them. They offered guidance, technology, advisors, not rulers, not overlords. They did not seek to replace the Dominion, only to ensure that those who had suffered could stand on their own. The Galactic Coalition was born. Not an empire, not a government, but a unified council of free civilizations, standing as equals, rather than masters and servants. And though humanity did not claim leadership, everyone knew the truth. The coalition existed because humanity had made it possible, And if any force at all, dared to rise in tyranny again, if another empire sought to enslave and destroy, they would face what the Dominion had faced. They would face humanity. Humanity's departure, but not its absence. And then, after everything, after burning the Dominion's war machine to the ground, after dismantling its oppressive structure, after ensuring that those who had suffered could rebuild, humanity did something no one expected. They left. Their war fleets withdrew, vanishing into the darkness of space, returning to their home systems. Their soldiers, their dreadnoughts, their overwhelming presence, it all faded from sight. To some, it was unnerving. How could they just leave? To others, it was proof of something far more terrifying than conquest. Humanity had never fought for power. They had fought because it was right, and though they had stepped back into the shadows, though they no longer patrolled every hyperlane or hovered above liberated worlds, one thing was certain. They were watching. They had proven that they could erase an empire when provoked, that if another dominion were to rise, if any force ever again sought to subjugate and terrorize the stars, the response would be the same, a single act of cruelty, a single innocent life taken, and the void would once again be filled with 500,000 human dreadnoughts, waiting, watching, unstoppable. The Dominion had believed itself invincible. They had thought their power eternal. They had never imagined that a single act of brutality, so routine, so casual, would be the mistake that shattered them. But the galaxy had learned, and no one would make that mistake again. The legacy of humanity, legends spread, growing in whispers across the stars. Tales of human warships that still patrolled the darkest corners of the galaxy, waiting in silence. Stories of entire fleets that had never returned to Earth, but instead lingered, hidden, watching for the first signs of tyranny. Some believed that human agents now walked among them, unseen but ever present, ensuring that no empire could rise unchecked. Others claimed that, if one were to send a distress signal, if a world were ever threatened again, the blackness of space would crack open, and humanity's vengeance would descend once more. A warning was etched into the fabric of the stars, repeated in hushed voices, feared in the hearts of those who might one day seek to rule through oppression. Never again. The Dominion had believed itself above consequences. The Dominion had believed humanity was nothing, and for that mistake, the stars themselves had burned. Now, the galaxy stood free. But in the silence, in the darkness beyond the edge of known space, something else remained. Not an empire. Not a fleet. Not an army, a presence, a promise. If tyranny rises again, humanity will return, and this time, there would be no second chances. And that is the story of how one act of cruelty led to the most devastating war the galaxy had ever seen. What do you think? Would humanity really go this far to protect justice? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe if you enjoyed this story. Every great journey starts with a few brave explorers, and right now, HFY Chronicles-849 is just beginning. Your support means everything. Until next time, stay curious, stay vigilant, and remember, humanity never forgets.